This is the reason why Lane Kiffin makes all of that money, and he is going to earn every single dollar this year. We'll explain. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we take a look at a key piece that is returning to full go on the defensive side. That is cornerback Jalen Braxton, who's actually playing a little free safety. He's back to full speed, and that is a massive boost for Pete Golding's unit. And Ole Miss made a little move to replace Kelvin Bolton on the recruiting staff, but is it a little too late? But first, we're talking about why this might be the most important season of the Lane Kiffin tenure in Oxford. After a disappointing finish a year ago, can Lane finally overachieve? And is Austin Simmons the unexpected catalyst to make that happen? All of that and more right now on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to our everydayers who make the show what it is, and that is the most fun way to follow Ole Miss sports. So do us a favor, like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, and comment on the video down below. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep everything free. So if you could do that for us, we'd appreciate it as well. Don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you at the click of a button. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's Monarch Money. So this is a really interesting situation with what's going on, because I talk all the time how last season Ole Miss had a 12-0 roster and went 9-3 with them. Ole Miss ended up missing the playoffs with a roster that was up towards the upper crust of college football. We had Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Previews, who rated Ole Miss having the second best roster. The whole thing was Ole Miss had a national championship level roster, and they went 9-3 and missed the playoffs a year ago. Lane Kiffin knows that. He's aware of that. That is the reason they're hitting more this fall. That is the reason they're being very specific and very, very thoughtful with the way they went about building this roster. They knew with the House settlement, they couldn't do what they did a year ago when they went and got Walter Nolan, because the House settlement was going to allow schools to have retention over some of these big name players. So you had to evaluate, you had to scout, you had to do all of that stuff when constructing this roster. Lane Kiffin was aware of what this season could be for him, and that is the most important year in his tenure at Ole Miss. Listen, Lane Kiffin's job is not in jeopardy. It's not anywhere near in jeopardy. But that doesn't mean there's no pressure this season. That doesn't mean that Lane Kiffin doesn't need to overachieve, because we are at the point where narratives start getting established on coaches. Lane Kiffin at USC didn't quite make it over the hump. Lane Kiffin at AAU did not make it over the hump, although he won a conference title. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss has gotten close, but hasn't gotten over the hump. And what Lane Kiffin's narrative is starting to become is a really great coach that does a really fantastic job roster building, who can't get over the hump. And especially at a school like Ole Miss, where they haven't had a whole lot of success in the last 50 years. Getting over the hump was going to be difficult regardless, but Lane Kiffin has Ole Miss on the cusp of that. And last season, they absolutely should have, but they didn't. If Lane Kiffin fails this year, next year, you're going to see a narrative established to where Ole Miss is talked about like they used to. The little Ole Miss narrative is going to come back into play. Fair or not, it absolutely is. So this is a massive season for Lane Kiffin to make the playoffs. And here's the thing. they absolutely can make the playoffs. Here's his schedule with Locked On Ole Miss's prediction. I'm thinking they're going 10-2 this season. They came in at preseason number 15 in the coaches poll. That's about 9-3 level. So 9-3, 10-2. They think that's going to happen. The over-under on this Ole Miss team is at about 8.5, according to FanDuel at the moment. But if you look at Ole Miss's schedule this season, Georgia State at home, at Kentucky, that's number 16 in the SEC, according to preseason. Home against Arkansas, home against Tulane, home against LSU, home against Washington State. That is 5 out of the first 6 games at home to break in a quarterback that is talented but young. So you have the advantage of breaking him in a way that you would want to do that. At Georgia is going to be an incredibly tough game, but heck, Austin Simmons has already played pretty well against Georgia. At Oklahoma is going to be a tough game. That'll be the first time that Ole Miss has gone up to Norman. Then you have South Carolina at home, the Citadel at home, and Florida at home before going down and taking over Mississippi State the Friday after Thanksgiving. So I think personally Ole Miss can go 10-2, but it's on Lane Kiffin because as I have told people this year, they're like, Ole Miss is going to take a step back. And I'm like, yeah, they absolutely are. But they're not taking a step back from 9-3. Everybody assumes they went 9-3, so a step back means 8-4 or 7-5. That's not the way this works. A step back is from 12-0 because that's what that roster was. A step back to 10-2, that's a 2-game swing. That's a pretty big step. But if you want to look at the real of this, that is what we're looking at. That is what Lane Kiffin has. So the playoff becomes a real discussion for Lane Kiffin in this reloading type year with Austin Simmons and the other new players coming over, with the schedule that they have, with Austin Simmons, who I think has a chance to be the catalyst for all of this to happen, a very T. Martin type deal. Austin Simmons last season went 19-32, 280 yards, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Austin Simmons was a very good backup player behind Jackson Dart a year ago. I think that Austin Simmons has a chance to be a 1-1 level player. And when you have that level of talent, and when you talk to people around the program and to a person, they talk about how excited they are for this player, it kind of raises the expectations even a little more. So if Ole Miss makes the playoff this season, the talk becomes about how Ole Miss overachieved because the bar has been set narrative-wise. Lane Kiffin gets the credit due of making the playoffs. If Ole Miss makes it even as a number 12 seed, that is a massive accomplishment for Lane Kiffin. It will take him from a good coach to a great coach, or a great coach to an elite coach, depending on what he does in the college football playoff. The best thing that Lane Kiffin does right now is roster build. There's not many equals in college football with Lane Kiffin on roster building. There is other stuff that as a head coach, he can get a little bit better at, and he will get a little bit better at. Playing the game as a favorite. We talked about this. Last season, Ole Miss played the slot machine of playing analytics and acting like an underdog, even though they had the more talented team. The Nick Saban rule would have probably sent them 11-1 or 12-0. If they would have ended every possession with a kick, that is enough to where they would have won all their games and probably got a bye and played in the SEC championship game. Play as a favorite. Denounce analytics as much as you can. Use it some, but don't use it on the road in a position to where you could add momentum to the situation. People that are all in on analytics do not believe in momentum for whatever reason. And whenever you don't get a 4th down in Florida in the swamp, or you don't get a 4th down on the goal line in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium, that creates a groundswell that is super tough to overcome. So we'll see exactly how that goes this season. Ole Miss has landed an in-state recruiter target, but is it a little bit too little too late to make a real impact this cycle? We'll break down what that means for the Rebels next. Ever wish managing your money felt a little bit easier with Monarch Money? It absolutely can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you the full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. You know, when I first started using Monarch Money, the first thing I noticed was how much money I was spending by ordering out, how much money was being wasted on laziness. Monarch helped me clean all of that up. And now we are financially thriving. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, Ole Miss this season in Mississippi, as far as recruiting goes, it's a failure. There's really not a way that you can look where it's not a failure for Ole Miss. And when you had a situation like Kelvin Bolding and they were building towards this year, he absolutely failed with what he was doing. He ended up going off to LSU, got the recruits, all of that stuff. That's fine. But this was the year that Ole Miss had Kelvin Bolding in the building for, and he did not perform for whatever reason. I get the fact that the staff, they're all friends together. They all get along, but just on the outside looking in, you can't have that many 4-stars. You can't have that many highly recruited players and whiff on all of them and that not be a failure. And whenever you go off to another school within the conference, there feels like you might be taking a little bit of responsibility for that. That's my opinion on the change at recruiting guy, whatever the position might be. Ole Miss hired a recruiting coordinator or recruiting somebody in the personnel office. I'm not exactly 100% sure of the title name. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss football, they added Old Dominion's Dwike Wilson to the recruiting staff. If I mispronounced the first name, I apologize. It looks like Dwike, but it could be Dwike. I'm not 100% sure there. But Kiffin and company officially hired the group of 5 staffer that joining the Rebels ahead of the 2025 season. Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels have made a new staff hire in Oxford after adding Old Dominion's Dwike Wilson, according to 247 Sports. Wilson will serve as a prominent recruiting role for the Ole Miss staff after making the move prior to the 2025 season. And it's just become a thing. Is it just a little bit too late for this season? He served at Indiana under Kane Womack. He helped build the roster that won 10 games at USA with Kane Womack. He served some time at USM as well. He has some deep roots inside the state of Mississippi, and he was a student assistant at Ole Miss. Overall, though, I'm not 100% sure about this coach, this staffer. I tend not to go overboard about the personnel grouping staffers because what they do, we're not 100% sure of, and it's partial information and all of that stuff. But Ole Miss needed to make the hire replacing Kelvin Bolding quicker than the other hires that they need to make in the personnel department because Jace Matthews announces Friday. He's one guy that you at least are on the board with, even though your odds of landing him probably aren't that good at this moment. But at least there's a starting point where you can say, hey, this guy is here. The Mississippi prospects, there are still a few more months to turn it around. Everybody that might be asking and texting me all the time about Braylon Womack, do not expect Braylon Womack at Ole Miss. It seems like there's a problem with the family with Ole Miss over something that happened with the sister and softball. So Braylon Womack likely will not end up at Ole Miss. But other players in the state of Mississippi, the kid that's up the road in New Albany, or the offensive lineman that is down at West Jones, Dwike Wilson kind of can join the recruiting parade and hopefully try to turn one or two of those around. Over the last couple of years, Ole Miss has been the dominant program in the state in recruiting. Landing in the high school level, Caleb Cunningham, the number one player in the state, Cam Franklin, the number one player in the state until the very end, when it was gotten by William Eccles, who was the number one player in the state at Ole Miss. And before that, his son Taron Perkins. Ole Miss has done very well getting highly thought of recruits out of the state of Mississippi. But this year, for whatever reason, the Tristan Keys looks like he's going elsewhere. The whole Jace Matthews thing, that we'll see exactly how that goes. And Ole Miss has struggled on the in-state, with the exception of a running back from Kemper County. It will be on this guy to help come up with a strategy and work on trying to turn that around as best as possible and get ready for the 2027 class, because that's going to be important as well. This whole thing will be about relationship building. It will. It absolutely will be about relationship building. And we'll see exactly where they land on that. Good players on the board, lots of chances to make a splash. Now just go do it, if that makes sense. Should be a really interesting time for Ole Miss high school recruiting, especially winning 10 games 3 out of the last 4 years. But as I tell people all the time, and people hit me up on text, they hit me up in DMs, they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, Ole Miss has a healthy collective, but not a wealthy collective. And they are very efficient. They can put forth competitive offers and all of that stuff with Walker Jones running thing. But if you want to outbid Ole Miss, you can absolutely outbid Ole Miss. You don't have the financial muscle behind an offer that other places have, like LSU, or Auburn can go crazy. Mr. Yellowwood can make NIL happen. Texas and Texas A&M, we don't even need to talk about. But big money schools, they're going to have the big money advantage. And if the recruit is money centric, which most of them are, it will be difficult with the high school level recruits. And it's the reason I tell people all the time, it's important to finish in the top 2. If you finish in the top 2 and you become the fallback after that recruit gets unhappy or something happens where they are, you have a legit chance to land that player because you were the second option from the beginning. So we'll see how it goes. Dwike Wilson signed on at Ole Miss. Should be pretty interesting to see exactly how that goes. I do want to let you know, in our final segment, Ole Miss has got a major fall camp boost on Monday night. Jalen Braxton returned to full speed. What does that mean for the secondary? We'll break all of that down next. Ole Miss had their first full pads practice of fall camp, and it wasn't Michael Katz, as you noticed last night. It was Dalen Flowers. But that is what went on in the practice. The big story that came out of it, though, was the return to full go from Jalen Braxton. And we talked before camp started about how Jalen Braxton moved back to free safety because of the emergence of Ricky Fletcher. Jalen Braxton is there, and he is now a full go. He has taken off the black jersey and is playing. He's the third free safety, according to On3. I think that was Ben Garrett that said that. Said he was third yesterday or something like that. Again, depth charts at this portion of the camp, it's a little bit too early to go down that road. But Jalen Braxton coming in as the third option, or whatever it is, at free safety behind Nick Cole is interesting to me. When you look at Braxton, he's somebody that has been in a black jersey recovering from injury for a while. He was a freshman All-SEC player at Arkansas in 2022 or 2023. In 2024, he was injured against Oklahoma State and ended up sitting out the rest of the year, transferred to Ole Miss. Everybody thought that Jalen Braxton was brought in to be the replacement for Trey Amos. If anybody remembers that, that's the way everybody was talking. The transfer from Arkansas is going to replace Trey Amos. And then things started to change. The narrative started to change a little bit. And Jalen Braxton started to get looked at back in the secondary. And a lot of that has to do with losing a little bit of depth in the Corey Adams situation, what the sad thing that's going on in Memphis, but you did lose a little bit of depth. And because Ricky Fletcher has been Mr. Consistency in fall camp, you were able to take a really good cornerback and move him back to free safety. And now he has to learn it. He's got all of the ball skills of a cornerback, but we all know that Pete Golding loves to take a cornerback and make a safety out of it. He has done it over and over and over again. The John Saunders role is the most familiar, and he had one of the most dominating performances on that Ole Miss defense a year ago, and he is largely unsung, but he was a cornerback that got to Ole Miss, and Pete Golding said, no, you're a safety. So Pete Golding doing the same thing with Jalen Braxton, that's just him acknowledging that the John Saunders and Trey Washington hole is legit. And Jalen Braxton is likely the favorite to win that role if he can stay healthy because of the talent of Jalen Braxton. But I'm going to tell you something right now, just real quick. Couple of names that you're not hearing at the moment whenever you check on stuff. You're not hearing much from Sage Ryan, for better or for worse. It doesn't mean he's not showing out, just nobody's talking about it. You're not hearing, honestly, from Whitehead Williams. Everybody talked about him. He was on the field first at the beginning of camp. He's not a name that is coming through in the moment. Now that we are in full pads, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Right now, the name that you're hearing is Nick Cole. Nick Cole is starting at safety. Again, that's from, I think, Ben Garrett of the On3 podcast. I get them all mixed up. But Nick Cole is out there with the ones, and he played a little bit in the Gator Bowl when Ole Miss just completely blew out the Duke Blue Devils. Nick Cole's an athletic guy from the state of Alabama. He is getting the reps at free safety. We're not talking about Whitehead Williams. We're not talking about Sage Ryan. Nick Cole is getting the starter reps at the moment. Jalen Braxton's trying to climb up the depth chart and catch him as well. But Nick Cole is the name kind of on the tip of people's tongue. Can he hold off Jalen Braxton? Or is Nick Cole destined to be the free safety? Now, remember, Lane Kiffin gets a lot of crap for being a transfer portal guy. Trey Washington was a high school guy. Before that, A.J. Finley was a high school guy. Lane Kiffin has always had a free safety that was a high school born and bred in the Ole Miss program. Nick Cole's another guy that was a high school guy. I'm not saying that that's going to work out this time. I'm saying that's something to pay attention to. Familiarity with the defense on the back end of that defense, deeper than the deepest free safety positions. Obviously, high schools have done pretty well in this Lane Kiffin system. But transfers, again, John Saunders was a transfer. Absolutely. One of the best players to ever put on a shirt at Ole Miss, if you ask me. He played unbelievably well. And he is going to be the player, him and Trey Washington, the players that are most missed in the secondary. Ole Miss is pretty good stacked at cornerback right now. When you look at Ricky Fletcher, when you look at Antonio Kite, when you look at Cedric Beavers, and when you look at Chris Graves, there's a lot of experience, a lot of length. There's a lot to be excited about where that defensive back room is. But these are the players that we're hearing about at the moment. Again, doesn't mean anything. We might stop hearing about them tomorrow, but we have decided to treat you like grown-ups. And when we hear something, we're going to say something. That's the way it works. We built a pretty good network of what's going on. And those are the names that we are hearing about in fall camp right now. So should be pretty interesting for the Ole Miss Rebels and everybody else as well. You know, we are introducing a new segment on this show called Ole Miss Trivia. Creative, I know. But the way this works and the way this is going to work is I just want to give you a chance to be interactive. to prove your Ole Miss fandom. I'm going to ask some questions. Some of them are going to be deep cuts. Some of them are going to be pretty easy. Some of them are going to be absolutely obscure, okay? We're going to start with an easy one today. And let's check out who is paying attention and who knows what is going on as well. All right, so here we go. The question for Ole Miss Trivia. In Ole Miss's 22-12 victory over Alabama in 1988, that is the legendary win where a brick got thrown through the window of Bill Curry at the dedication of the Bear Bryant Museum. On that day, how many passing yards did Alabama have? Put your answer down in the comments below. But how many passing yards did Alabama have on the day in Ole Miss's 22-12 victory over the Crimson Tide in 1988? That's the legendary brick game at the dedication of the Bear Bryant Museum. So put your answer down in the comments below. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment down below. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on all of the rapid changes around college football's landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody, and remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you later.